from NewsroomPost. Today we are discussing the business of news this era, challenges and opportunities ahead. Our panelists include eminent journalists and media stalwarts. We have Padmaja Joshi, she is anchor and news editor at Times Now. Sandhya Ravishankar, editor, The Lead. Prasanna Vishwanathan, Chief Executive Officer, Swaraj. And Siddharth Jarabi, senior journalist and economic policy commentator. My first question is to Padmaja. How the news business is running at this time and what challenges you are facing? I can start with Sandhya. Okay. My question is with Sandhya. What is the sustainability model for small and niche media organizations and what challenges they face, whether their challenges are different from the big media houses or the same one?
Well, we're definitely not facing the same challenges as the bigger media houses. But what I can tell you is that for the digital platforms, while funding has already been a revenue model, in fact, has already been a pretty dicey concept. We have really not got any revenue model as such, and everyone's experimenting, everyone's trying to do something, trying to make a little bit of money, but we don't have that panacea. We don't have that one mantra that is working for all of us. So, and I think world over this is the case. Everyone's trying to crack it. But now with the pandemic, it becomes tougher for us. But the opportunity in all of this is that the digital media is being seen as an alternative to print and to television. People are, more online. They're reading, consuming news and journalism more online. Now, our challenge is to keep those readers coming back to us, to keep them with us, and to also monetize it. So, I think this pandemic has shown us that digital media in India is here to stay. And that is a very positive takeaway that I have from this pandemic so far, Santosh. So sustainability is actually the big question now. Our traditional advertising models, which are there in the newspaper, they're likely to shift in in some part to the digital media. We're not very sure how it's going to happen because we're not seeing it happen yet. But definitely, I think digital media is going to be on the radar of advertisers, on the radar of big companies and corporates. How much of that is going to benefit the smaller players, like not the ones, not the digital platforms of say a Times of India or a Hindu or in India Today. I'm not talking about the big internet sites. I'm talking about the small players like the Lead, like Swarajya. I mean, Prasanna would also, I'm sure, agree with me on this. We don't know how much of a slice of that pie we're going to be able to get, but Santosh, I feel that this is a fantastic opportunity to try and make advertisers to make corporates and companies realize the importance of credibility and to make credibility something that can be sold. And it doesn't have to be about the number of followers or the number of hits that a site has anymore. It has to be more about what kind of journalism they're doing, the quality of journalism they're doing. So this, I think, is a great opportunity for us to tell people who are spending money on advertising on various sites that hey, it's not just about having those 5 million hits. It doesn't matter if you have like 5,000 hits, but if we're a credible site, then please put in your money. And I think we need a economic shift in attitude for that, Santosh.
Yes, sure. Credibility is a major issue here. And now my question is with Padmaja. How the news business is running, Padmaja, at your end? At this time, even most of the reporters have been already contacted with the disease. You have already seen this. So, how the news gathering and the news credibility we can both maintain this time?
It's a big challenge
challenge right now. You're right. The credibility is not affected because the reporters continue to work even if it's from home. But yes, the fact that they are not able to go out. Luckily for our network, none of our reporters were infected, thankfully. But in anticipation, they were all told to quarantine themselves. So everyone has been working from home. Most people have been working from home, not everyone. Uh, so on-spot reporting did suffer a little bit. Uh, Only one third of the people who were otherwise be out were going out. So that has been a challenge for the last 30 days. However, now we are opening up and more people are going out. The thing also is that we are facing a problem in terms of so we did like a rotating shift. 14, half of our workforce would be at home and they would work from home, which, to be honest, in TV is a little difficult. You can't really work from home in TV because all the edits, the writing of the script can only happen when you look at the visuals. So, realistically speaking, only half we were working at half strength, which became a real challenge. I was working from home, which meant that everything had to be done twice. So even if I have to look at a visual, somebody has to record it for me on a camera, on a phone camera, and send it to me so I can look at it and then I can write scripts from home. So everything, the work gets doubled. That is quite a challenge, of course, but I don't think overall there is a problem of credit.
Okay. My next question is with Prasanna. Prasanna, with the growth in print, digital subscription increased exponentially, and local news trend is also seen.
Yep.
In this scenario, what are the opportunities lies ahead for digital media organizations?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me for this discussion, and wonderful to hear the views from Sandhya, who's like one of runs a very highly credible digital organization, and also Padmaja's perspective about the news operation. So from my personal experience and perspective, I think as far as the pandemic has fundamentally and I think probably irretrievably altered the media landscape actually, and I think the business I think there's a huge opportunity for the digital platforms. For instance, from Swarajya's perspective, what I would like to highlight is that all the subscription based digital publications have with a sticky audience. I think they might have a fairly good growth opportunity actually. So at the end of the day, I think all even the mainstream media print publications would have to kind of potentially move to a digital offering, because one thing that's clearly going to happen is that the already all the media business was suffering from lack of advertising revenues, and with the kind of uncertainty in the business post this pandemic, I think all the discretionary spent by big corporations and others around advertising is going to be under I think that's going to be the first budget that is going to be cut by the corporate. So
Yes.
I really see that advertising is not going to revive for at least another 6 to 10 months at least actually. So everybody needs to pivot to a readership revenue model. But like but the challenge is that only readership revenue model sometimes will not be enough to even cover costs. For instance, we've built a very reasonably good base of subscribers over the last 4 years, but that's still not good enough to provide us a completely robust business models. So what I think is that unless there is going to be adequate private funding and non-profit investment by, like, say, public spirited individuals who are trying to nurture some kind of diversity in the voice and all that, the sustainability issue will become a real challenge. Of course, 60 to 70% of the revenues can be realized from readership, but I think there has to be some kind of grants. It's very much like all the universities that you see, right? Like the students fee will just not be enough to cover the cost of running an academic institution. So you typically have a lot of grants, philanthropic grants, and all that. So for a credible, high quality digital platform to survive, advertising is out, subscription plus philanthropic contribution and public spirited individuals wanting to invest in the business model. I mean, not in the business model, in terms of improving the quality of the discourse in the country. That's how I see it playing out, Santosh. Actually.
But the institution who are supporting any media house, they will not influence media house views.
See, I think again, I think this debate is little. I would say that I think it's pretty okay having ideologically leaning media houses. I think, like, at the end of the day, of course, polarization, complete polarization would not be good for very meaningful and healthy conversations. But at some level, it's pretty okay that if media explicitly identifies with some ideological worldview, so you can always give an allowance for that and consume the content that they create. See, public spirited individuals also, some of them would set some broad parameters for what the media houses would have to follow. But I think the very nature of the media is to assert independence, and so I think all the philanthropic individuals, or the public spirited institutions which want to fund media houses, they already kind of reckon that media has an independent streak. And I mean, of course, there might be some red lines drawn, but I think it's par for the course, according to me, actually. So
Okay.
it's a complex process. You need to work
Yeah,
with
there
them.
is a very thin line.
Yeah. You need to work with them. And see, let's also be very honest that I'll make a last point before I do that. If you really look at, at least the funding that goes, typically all the big businesses and all that, they seem to be more funding across the globe. I'm talking more. They fund, like, say, a left-leaning institutions, because at the end of the day, they don't want that kind of very adversarial or conflict journalism unleashed on the corporations by the left-wing outlets. Okay, so let's not make it very ideological that big business only supports certain type of ideological news outlets. Actually, the evidence is to the contrary. World over, you see, corporates or institutions actually funding outlets which have like a kind of a left or a almost like anarchist ideologies, actually. So that's the larger point that I want to make.
My question is with Siddharth now. In the wake of reduction in ad spending and fall in ad revenues, how the digital media organizations will cope up? Do government doing anything for them?
Okay, Dhanyawad, Namaskar. Thank you very much for having me here. I want to answer your question in two parts, if you just allow me. And since I'm
Sure.
I have some data with me. Just yesterday, 24 hours ago, the Broadcast Audience Research Council has released its latest data, and one of the data points that our viewers and our entire audience should focus on is that a new normal seems to have been set for smartphone usage, and that
Yes.
has implications for news of 3 hours 40 minutes per day. Now, obviously, if you look at the cumulative TV consumption, which is 1.16 trillion minutes in the week that was being reviewed, there is a gap. But just focus on the smartphone issue and consumption. And if you look at the advertising growth, there is of course a lot more that we can discuss. But I also want to answer your question through the fact that news in the post-corona era has evoked massive interest. People are consuming news on every single platform that is available to them. Even Bharat has been consuming news. हालांकि भारत की consumption में थोड़ी difference आई है, because in rural India people are going out for their farming needs, and that is why you see a little tapering off in consumption. So news still remains a urban phenomenon, but in Bharat, news and news plus is being consumed on smartphones. That has implications for advertisers. Now, if I were to give the same data from the BARC latest survey, it shows that major advertisers have pretty much held back on all manner of spending during this period. There are smaller advertisers, and there is government spending which is significant. So a lot of advertisers, according to me, will be preparing for the government steps in terms of consumption booster to decide where they will put in their next round of money. अभी कोई मार्केट में बहुत ज्यादा खरीदारी करने नहीं जा पा रहा है. You cannot advertise an air conditioner right now because the showroom is closed. Maruti cannot advertise any new cars because the showrooms are closed as well as the factory is closed. Same applies for smartphones. Same applies for any discretionary spending. The only advertising that is happening right now is advertising which is essential. There is also some amount of advertising that the government is doing. And in response to your question about government support of standalone digital entities, अगर मैं आपका प्रश्न सही से समझ पाया, I would say that the government should immediately treat the digital medium on equal par and footing with newsprint and television.
Sure. That's the point.
And the TRAI, just one last point, the TRAI, as you know, has a process underway for some time to bring in some sort of regulatory framework for digital media. I would say that the TRAI and Government of India, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, must quickly decide whatever they have to decide. Otherwise, they will keep the matter pending and it will, put a little bit of pressure and delays on any promoter's investment capability, his ability to raise funding, because in digital media you have to continue to raise funding on a sequential basis.
Correct.
For आपने influence on media houses, I will like an opportunity later to just take 2 minutes on that.
Okay, government how can means step up, like DAVP has just recently given a chance to enroll there, but it has kept back. Even other state organizations are doing like that, but they haven't released the funds or any ads till now. Also, there is complaints about the Google and Facebook revenue.
Yep.
Their revenue share is not means transparent. So what? How they can be this can be contained?
So
Yes, Sandan.
yeah, no, I think some great points by Siddharth. See, actually, if you really look at the government's the digital media play in the government spend, let's be very honest that among all advertisers, I think if you combine the state and the union government spend on quote unquote the publicity and the other campaigns that they run, that's a huge money, and it's typically been mostly captured by the print / mainstream media, because simply because I don't think so the information ministries or the the state publicity departments or whatever you call it in different states, they just don't have the they are not geared, or they don't even have the basic measurement tools or mechanism to understand the digital and also pay ad rates based on that actually. So first of all, like Siddharth says, I think we really need digital first kind of media platforms to be there in the advertising mix of the government, which is very important. I think they should lay. I think there have been some very measures in small things, but I think there has not been a consistent policy in that. So there has to be some kind of a level playing field, because like say a print paper with 100 with 10,000 copies probably gets more privilege than a digital publication which has like say a 10 million views. Okay, so they have
Good point.
Yeah, they have to kind of build a good evaluation criterion. That is a very important step forward, I think, in terms of thing. See, and also the last point before you can invite in others is that I think the way in which Facebook and Google have pretty much cannibalized the revenue, and like for example, like I think there was a lot of enthusiasm around the digital first kind of business models around 2014-15. Everybody thought that they would put out a whole lot of content, and then there will be a virality traffic, and Google and Facebook going to pay you a lot of money. I think that model simply didn't work. and I don't think so it is
Yes.
ever going to work actually. So there are some attempts in countries like Australia, etc., to kind of force Google and Facebook to share some part of the revenue with the publishers. But I don't know, like in India, I don't know, like how much. Yeah.
Prasanna, I just want to interject.
Yeah.
Please apologize to other panelists. I want to inform our viewers that the Finance Ministry is currently studying a tax when it comes to these global media, social media platforms. I can say that with considerable degree of authority on my behalf as a reporter.
Wonderful.
That proposal is being studied. And just 60 seconds on one point which you touched upon, Prasanna. The danger of some of these platforms and their algorithms is that they increasingly serve us only the kind of news based on our search history, the artificial intelligence paradigm.
Correct.
And why I'm raising this is that a single platform, a standalone news platform, which is motivated by its desire to provide news on a unfiltered, unvarnished basis, factually gets sort of swept under.
Correct.
It goes under this avalanche because these larger platforms use these algorithms of engagement, and that engagement data feeds into their ad revenues.
Right.
And news in some ways gets held ransom to a particular pecuniary interest. And the fundamental point, and I don't mean to sound sort of jingoistic on this, is that many of these platforms are not owned or have ownership residing in India.
Absolutely.
And therefore there is concentration in a few hands.
Correct.
So इंडिया के छोटे प्लेटफॉर्म्स जो हैं वो इन बड़े प्लेटफॉर्म्स की टेक्नोलॉजी, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस and their ability to aggregate advertising, we all suffer as a consequence. And Prasanna, that's why this is very important what you said. Last 6 years, I am still searching for a viable digital model for in India.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I want to ask to Sandhya how she thinks the interest of digital media can be saved.
The interest of digital media, well, I don't know about the other states, but as far as Tamil Nadu goes, I can tell you for a fact that digital media is not recognized as, media or, journalists, and we don't get accreditation in by the state government. So, which means we cannot attend, chief minister's, events or the prime minister's events, stuff like that. So,
at the central government level also, they do not recognize digital reporters. They do not give accreditation to any digital correspondent regardless of the reach.
Exactly.
Now they have the policy.
I mean, so our problem begins with the reporting process, and then it goes on to the,
They have the policy to accredit, but they don't give.
They don't give, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They are not providing that.
Okay.
So when we start with hurdles like this, where we do not get access in terms of reporting itself, what exactly are we going to do? So beyond this, then we have issues of, we have to get our numbers up. It's this really, like Siddharth was saying and like Prasanna was saying, when we're dependent on companies like Google and Facebook and whatnot, we need the numbers. If we don't have the numbers, if we don't have a team just working and putting out little videos and, like bombarding the internet with snippets of information, then we do fall back. And many of us don't have that bandwidth. We don't have the manpower to do it. And as a result, our followers, our numbers, our likes, whatever, they're all fewer. And as a result, again, we are affected by, companies that say, oh, you don't have X number of likes, or you don't have X number of followers, you don't have X number of page views, whatever it is, and we're right at the bottom of the barrel as far as advertising revenue goes as well. So it's there's hurdles from the beginning, and it's probably time for this to change and change drastically.
Now my question is with Padmaja. What do you think the viewers give importance to see? What is the choice of viewers to see on TV?
Right now, during the pandemic or in general?
during the pandemic and in general?
So during the pandemic, that's a very good question. I actually wanted to get the views of everyone on this. Have you found that the people want to consume a different kind of content in the last 1 month as opposed to earlier? So right now, it's a big challenge. Earlier, especially with TV, we've had a huge number of people who earlier used to watch general entertainment channels. A large chunk of the GC viewership has now come to news. And this is a viewer whose viewing habits one doesn't really know. So one doesn't know what he or she is looking for. Are they looking for just information? Are you looking for discussions? And TV being a visual medium, I think in this last 1 month, everyone has just been trying to experiment with seeing what your viewer wants to see and how best to put it to her on TV. Because
Correct.
I think there is so much information, especially on digital, in print. Now, how can TV do it differently? One, of course, is that you go out reporting. But then visually, there's really not much that can happen. Everything is shut. It's a lockdown. So visually, everything is dead. So largely, I think in the last 1 month, what people have wanted is a lot of myth busting, is information presented in a concise and interesting way. And most importantly, I think when it comes to TV, in addition to just the COVID related news, COVID related queries being answered, what is the news that is happening? The politics behind it. If you look individually, okay, so that this is happening in Maharashtra. Maharashtra numbers are very high, or Gujarat numbers are very high. Why is that? What are the small news stories that are there? How did, for example, Gujarat suddenly explode? What was that one case? I think the individual news stories is what people look for and people are interested in. But
Correct.
If the other panelists, because I really wanted this insight, what is the kind of content, Sandhya, you found that people really came for again and again?
There were
Especially
two things, Padmaja. One was, positive stories about people who helped other people, right? So
Correct.
there was, a Naxal turned MLA who was traveling all like hundreds of kilometers into the forest to distribute food. That did really well. So stuff like that, positive stories of ordinary people helping others, that did really well. The second thing was our specials, our own investigations, which nobody else had. And like we did a story on the rapid testing kits and what went on behind the scenes, and why this whole thing became an issue. That did really well. So and I mean, everyone was reporting the news, everyone's reporting what's happening on the field, the numbers, etc., the count was happening. But these two genres, I think, did really well for us. They worked for us.
Yeah. Padmaja, just like my feedback, a couple of things, I actually saw a kind of a surge in the viewership for public broadcaster. Okay. So somehow, the perception is that, of course, I think DD has its own challenges in, energetic programming and all that, which probably private channels do very well. But at the end of the day, at a time of a pandemic or a crisis, there is a certain level of, you can call it nostalgic value, or probably people seem to be trusting a public broadcaster more. If you really look at, even the YouTube channel of DD, there's a lot of viewership actually, especially, the experts getting interviewed. And because I think there is a perception that private channels sometimes tend to be noisy, and, the debates are polarizing and all that. So people are okay giving that, coming back to the public broadcaster. So that's one trend that I picked up broadly. Maybe this might be an isolated, maybe not a good example, but I think you have seen a revival of public broadcasting. Of course, it's up to the DD to focus on.
If I can interrupt, Prasanna, I think it's linked to some bit of the Ramayan surge, as they call it.
it was actually.
And the moment the DD moved into Uttar Ramayana, then
It dropped.
it has dropped. One interesting point, news and movies share has started to taper off from almost 10 days back, although it is still twice that of pre-COVID.
Okay.
So what seems to also be happening is there is a bit of coming in. But Muja, to answer your question, I think everyone is up to their ears in Corona news. No one wants to listen to any Chinese story at all. There is a high element of search, and I have seen that. For instance, we've broken a few stories and reported a few earlier. The story on the punishment meted out to the revenue service officers got the highest traction in the last in the current week. So people want information that is now slightly hatke from Corona and COVID, and if I can also say one more thing, people are tired of seeing movie stars or lifestyle gurus giving gyan. I don't need to sound ignorant. People are not at all relating to that. The novelty
But
factor of seeing a
lifestyle
star
gurus are doing.
But by the way, thanks Prasanna for your euphemism of energetic programming. That's a new one. I'm going to make a note of that for energetic programming. But you're right. So I think what happened was the first 3-4 days, there was just so much. There was such a cloud around what's happening.
Correct.
How bad is it? Everyone went into a DD mode, including private channels, and everyone was just we had doctors answering questions. After that, the viewers also got like Siddharth said, they were up to their ears, okay, because they were deluged with too much information, and frankly, it was bordering on paranoia.
Correct.
Because it seemed like everything was doomsday. So then people started looking for individual news stories. For example, I think opinions may vary, but I think Tabligh really hit a chord, depending on how you told the story. Because here was this one subsection, and it was, for lack of, at that time there was nothing else, and this was the most powerful visual story that we had. I mean, you cannot deny the fact that here were these images of doctors lying bloodied or an ambulance smashed, etc., and people pelting stones. So if we leave aside the criticism of oh, this is just turning communal, etc., it was all on camera. So, and it was a big news story that at a time when everyone felt only doctors are going to rescue us, it's in their hands, etc., you've got somebody who's going out and beating them, and it struck a chord with me for that reason. I don't think it was so much as a communal story.
No, not at all.
But it was a news story where people just couldn't understand how anyone could run away or beat up doctors or hide their travel history. And of course, it also sort of fed into the fear that why are people hiding their history? Is this going to turn out to be a big actually for the country? So yes, I think then the individual news stories started doing well.
So now the last question I want to ask is, what are your messages for masses as well as media houses in this pandemic?
Message would be to wash your hands, and please keep washing your hands once this is over and stop spitting. If that